I promised you that we'd do an episode about service dogs, and that's why I have my friend, fellow trainer, and founder of Rover Chase and the Rover Chase Foundation, Abigail Witthauer. Welcome. And for those of you who are watching this video rather than just listening to this podcast, you are holding up the most glorious puppy. Tell me about this puppy.
This is 16-day-old puppy. His name is Howdy, and he's from our latest service dog litter. There's 5 of them, and they're 16 days old today.
Oh my gosh. And of course, I was watching because I follow you on Facebook. So I know I was watching Mom getting ready, and we were like, oh, when are the puppies going to come? And actually, these are puppies that you raise for your Service Dog Foundation, isn't it? For your Service Dog organization. So I want to talk about that. But first of all, I want to ask you a few questions about, hey, what is it like being a trainer in Pelham, Alabama? What made you become a dog trainer? I mean, I've known you for a long time. You're a VSPDT, you're Victoria Still Positively dog trainer. You've spoken a lot to our students. You do a lot of speaking engagements. You are also speaking at the Dog Behavior Conference, which for everybody, April the 21st to the 23rd. So register. And you're talking about service dogs, lessons learned while raising heroes. But first of all, let's go back however many years ago, because I think you and I have been training kind of for the same length of time.
Yeah, I think so.
What made you become a dog trainer?
Yeah, so I always say that I came into it the good old-fashioned way, so just through family. So I was a pretty competitive equestrian as a young child, and through right before kind of that decision point that equestrians have to go to where they're like, are we going to do it like for real, like as a career or not? And I had quite a number of injuries. And so my mom was like, how about we take a year off and see if you like dog shows? And my mom had shown dogs in the late 60s and early 70s. So we had friends and family friends that showed dogs. So I started doing that, and I just kind of got bit by the bug, and I started with sight hounds. And as the years progressed, I got really interested, particularly in the sight hounds and the toy breeds that were struggling to be successful show dogs because of shyness or just not loving the dog show performance world. And I got really interested in behavior modification with those dogs. And that's kind of what started it.
Tell me about this, because, I go to Crufts, which is our largest dog show here in the United Kingdom. And also I've been to Westminster as well one time when I was doing some presenting work there. But tell me about the show world, because it's quite controversial in many ways.
I think it can be, which I will say I've always found to be a little bit strange coming from the inside, because from my perspective, growing up in it, I think conformation dog show people figured out rewards-based training and luring way before the, say, competition obedience world figured it out. Because once they figured out that dogs that are animated and alert and happy show better in conformation, then it was pretty well completely positive reinforcement for the majority of dogs at that point. So, sometimes you may see, especially I think when lay people that aren't in the industry watch it, a big debate that I have often with my interns is, I have this theory that what you view as leash corrections in dog shows are maybe not leash corrections, but maybe cues with leash movement. And I know that because when I show my own dogs, sometimes you do a little, what can look like a pop, but that's not how we train it. And it's not how it's reinforced. It's just a let's go cue without the verbal. And I think that that's sometimes where the controversy comes into play. And certainly there are dogs that don't enjoy dog shows that are still shown because they're very beautiful or they have beautiful coat or whatever it is. And it's not their favorite career path. But the vast majority of dogs that are high level of dog shows really love being show dogs.
And I always think that, that the sort of the general companion dog actually maybe leads quite, um, not a solitary lifestyle, but a less enriching lifestyle because, obviously their guardians are out at work or, they have other things to do. Whereas if you're in the show dog world, you are spending a lot of time with your dog. Your dog is spending a lot of time with you. And so, in a way, that's very enriching. You've got a great relationship there. You have to.
Yeah, there's an enormous amount of travel with dog shows, particularly in the United States. I'm not sure if it's the same in the UK, but if you're really actively showing, even just as a hobby, not as a professional handler, you're usually on the road 25 weekends a year with your dog, and you're in the van and you're driving or in the RV, and you're staying on show sites and you're socializing and you're in, I think I've seen, I was actually just having this conversation with my spouse the other day. I think I'm only lacking 3 states in the United States that I visited. And the vast majority of that is from my time showing dogs.
Wow. Okay. And you had a Chihuahua for a very long time. In fact, that's when I met you, I think.
Yeah. I think Biggie was pretty little, maybe 18 months
Yes.
old when we met. And he was just the greatest dog. And I think most people that have known me for a long time know me because of Biggie. So, and he was just the coolest dog ever. He just really
He
was.
was the coolest. I remember him wearing a leather jacket. I was like, that is one
Yeah.
cool Chihuahua.
Yeah, he really,
Oh my
I
gosh.
think, and that's another thing. Some people are like, oh, dogs shouldn't dress up. I'm the first to say Biggie preferred to wear clothes. He just liked attention. And so whatever it was that got him attention was completely fine with him, particularly clothing. And he had this little leather bomber jacket and this little leather, like, motorcycle hat, and it was a big hit. And he wore it he was 3.5 pounds, and he wore it with a little spiked collar, and people just went crazy.
Oh my God. So I was one of those. I absolutely adore him. But now you're really known actually for golden retrievers and breeding golden retrievers for service dog work. So, and I can hear that little one. Oh my gosh. That little one just
He's
did a little
dreaming. So he's
squeak.
asleep and he's doing the little puppy pop dreaming thing
Is
now.
he?
So
All right. So you, can you tell me your journey from training? Well, of course, you have a very, very successful training organization, boarding organization in Pelham, Alabama. But and of course, you utilize positive methods, which
mhm.
is one of the reasons, and you're extremely talented, which is one of the reasons why you're VSPDT, and we love having you in the group. But how did you make that transition from being I would, as for want of a better word, a companion dog trainer to actually service dog work?
Yeah, so the vast majority of the companion animal training that the facility does, Pelham is a little suburb of Birmingham. It's not far, 20 minutes from downtown. The vast majority of the pet dog training that's done at the facility now is done by my team. So I do very little of it. Really, the only non-service dog training I do at this point is dogs with really pretty significant behavior issues, typically major bite histories, things like that. And I still do a fair amount of that in the area. But the service dog transition was a little bit organic. I was attending college and I missed my dog, and I really wanted to get some volunteer hours for some certifications I was getting in my degree path. And so I just got it in my head that the thing I should be doing is raising a service dog on a college campus, which at that time, what feels like yesterday, what was in fact almost 20 years ago, is that was still kind of a new concept. And so I puppy raised for a big major organization all 4 years of college in the dorms. And I got really interested in service dogs at that point, and I started to really get very passionate about what was happening with those dogs. And my background in dog shows, I was really interested in the genetics of producing service dogs. That really interested me, and the general training, what these dogs could do for people. So I got very interested in that in my college years. And then, as life just happens sometimes in kind of a co-evolutionary way, I became fully disabled myself. Kind of my symptoms started late in college, and then I got, as most women in the United States do, I got my diagnosis almost 10 years later. But at that point, I was relatively disabled. So I got very interested in service dogs prior to my disability. And then as I became disabled myself, I got more and more interested in it.
What is it about golden retrievers that make such great service dogs?
Yeah, I just think they're really versatile. And I'm the first to say some of it is my personality. I think when we talk about service dogs, we always talk about the big three. And the big thing I say is that they're the big three for the reason. Every major service dog organization really in the world uses golden retrievers, Labradors, standard poodles, or mixes of the three. And there's a reason those are the most popular. They just have the skill sets and also the size and durability that is often needed for success. For me, I really loved the Goldens because I love Labradors. I've had standard poodles for several years as well. The Goldens are just a little bit less. And a little bit less for me suits my personality. The best way I can describe at least the Goldens from our lines that we produce for our program is they just really don't have a lot of original thoughts. They're like, well, that sounds like a great idea. And then you're like, well, what if we did this? And they're like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. And they just really don't have a lot of opinions. And I love that. They're soft. They're squishy. They are really strange from a training perspective because the things we think about with pet dogs, about threat gestures and making them anxious with kissing them in the face and squishing them. We're really cautious about that with pet dogs. And our Goldens almost need that. It's a really interesting genetic kind of selective breeding component that they've come out with our dogs that they want to be squished. They want threat gestures. And I just find that to be like really melty and also really lovely as service dogs.
For people who don't understand what threat gestures mean, could you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so threat gestures are I always kind of think of it as the difference of language between dogs as a species and humans as a species or as primates or whatever your belief is in that. We tend to be really frontal and forward. For those of you guys that are watching this podcast on the video, I love webcams for this because when we greet dogs, we're like, oh, hey, how are you? And we reach right into their face. And that's just what we do because they're so, they have so much neoteny and they're so cute and squishy. But a lot of dogs, that's not how they communicate with each other within their species. They're much more arced in their approach, much less eye contact, much more rear end greeting than front end greeting on polite greetings. And so most dogs have some sensitivity towards that very frontal human-based greeting that we do. Whereas many service dogs, you see this in a lot of programs, have kind of been selectively bred to either not have an aversion to that or even seek out some very frontal, very in the face greetings, which is incredibly valuable for service animals.
I've been very fortunate to be on the board of a service dog organization here in Georgia, and which mostly breeds golden retrievers, some poodles and retriever mixes, some Labradors, but mostly golden retrievers. And I absolutely see what you're talking about, even though they're a different line from yours. I absolutely see what you're talking about because it seems like those sort of boundaries that we have and we teach people to have with most other dogs, it goes out the window with these ones. Yeah. Because they have no concept of space. They're in your space. They're in your face. They want that. They almost want that sort of that feeling of being hugged. They like it. And it's really interesting to see the difference. And so for me, who's always because like you, my focus has been on working with very complex behavior cases, especially dogs that are showing aggressive behavior. And we have to be very careful. We have to be very aware of body language and not being too much pressure and not putting too much pressure on the dog or giving them the space that they need. And then when I'm around golden retrievers at Canine Assistance, it's totally different. It's absolutely different. It's like everything goes out the window and it's almost like I'm there not knowing what to do.
Yeah, I think it is really strange. I'm just super fortunate. My best friend is a veterinarian with a behavior specialty, and we practice together a lot, and we're just best friends. So that's just wonderful. And she has a dog from my program as her pet, and and we talk all the time about how strange it is to be working day in and day out in behavior practice with dogs, and then come home to this dog that has been bred for really an abnormal trait for the species. And I think it's really important that we recognize that we have selectively bred an abnormal behavior trait in service dogs to be that squishy. And, I always say that my service dog, Macallan, he wants to unzip your skin and crawl inside. I mean, that would be his perfect day, would just to be like baby Bjorned onto me the whole day. and that's an abnormal trait for pet dogs, and certainly for non-domesticated canines, a very abnormal trait. But I think it's a really interesting thing that you see consistently over many service dog organizations, not just ours, that is very much the same. And I really think that's interesting.